Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to A Real Point of View. My name is Greg Morgan. I'm also known as the Real Movie Guy. Down there is Mr. Stephen C. He's a guy that doesn't pick a bad movie. And last but not least, the movie maven herself, Miss Karen D. Welcome to A Real Point of View, and we're hanging out with the gang. How you guys doing?
Good.
Doing pretty good. Can't complain.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, a sad thing happened recently. A very wonderful and talented actor has gone on to act in another theater in another place. And that's the famous and one of my favorite actors, Mr. Kirk Douglas. And here's the kicker. Lived a very long and fulfilling life, I hope. But he died at the age of 103. That in itself is a feat, but nothing for this guy. He showed us throughout his career all the different feats and things that he was able to do. So tonight we're going to talk about him in a slight bit of homage, I guess, and talk about some of the films that he was in and the importance that he was to the film industry. And then the latter part of our show, we're going to try to talk a little bit about the upcoming Oscars this Sunday. So to kick us off, Karen, what have you guys to say about this wonderful actor?
Well, what I want to say is that the movie industry has lost an amazing leading light by the name of Isur Danielovich Dembski. That is the actual birth name of Kirk Douglas. He was born on December 9th and native of New York, but his parents were immigrants. He grew up poor. He grew up in a Jewish ghetto, basically, but found his way to school through wrestling. He was an excellent athlete, and that's how he found his way into school and became interested in theater. But along came World War II, so that ended aspirations for a lot of young men. But when the war was over, he got back into theater and, was looking for a way to sort of jumpstart his career. And he'd made friends along the way in acting school. One of the friends he made was Lauren Bacall. And Lauren Bacall had an excellent screen career at that point in time, which was in the 40s. And Hal Wallace, who is a huge director in Hollywood, directed Charlie Chaplin films, among other things, was looking for someone to star in a movie called The Strange Love of Martha Ivers. It was Lauren Bacall that suggested Kirk Douglas for that role. Kirk Douglas screen tested for that role and did a great screen test, and so Hal Wallace hired him. So his first entree into Hollywood royalty was with a leading role, which is almost unheard of, really, unless you're a starlet who, happens to be involved with the director. But for a guy, it's pretty hard to kind of just appear. Your first appearance on screen is as the star of a film. But that's what happened. And the rest, as they say, is history. He went on to star in over 90 roles. He had over 90 roles as an actor, over 30 over 30 roles as a producer, or 30 movies in which he either had an executive producer function or a producer function. So major force in Hollywood. And the other thing I just want to mention about him is that he didn't really forget where he was from. I mean, like I said, he grew up in a Jewish ghetto. Well, during the late 40s into the 50s, the Red Scare ruined a lot of lives. It sent a lot of talented actors, actresses, writers, directors into hiding. It ruined their careers. One person who was affected greatly was Dalton Trumbo. Guess how the Red Scare started to end? It was because Kirk Douglas insisted that Dalton Trumbo get a screenwriting credit, which was unheard of in 1950. And I forget the name of the film that he did. was it? It was not. It was not the. It was not Gunfight at the OK Corral. I forget the name of the film, but the fact that he did that, he put his career on the line. He put his reputation on the line, and I mean, people sort of like gasped with horror, because the Red Scare. What was so menacing about the Red Scare was that people whispered about it. It wasn't something you talked about. You didn't actually admit that you were affected. And the only thing you would say is that, you were a patriot. So with all of that, he said, no, I'm not going forward with this movie unless Dalton Trumbo gets the credit because he wrote the movie. And I'm sorry. And how could I forget that? It was Spartacus. That's what movie. That restarted Dalton Trumbo's career for not that long, but it did restart it, and it basically ended the Red Scare. But it took that. So
I'd like to interject a question. So those of us who are not very familiar with the very political essence of the Red Scare, can you just give a brief example? What is that?
Okay, the Red Scare was just basically a political sort of movement based on fear of communism and fear that communists were going to basically take over the world. And unless communism or communist tendencies were rooted out at home, then America was in danger of becoming a communist country. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm having this many brain farts. But Senator from Wisconsin, somebody help me out here.
Don't remember.
Goodness.
Not as important for that detail.
McCarthy.
Just the understanding.
Joe McCarthy.
Okay.
It was Joe McCarthy. Joe McCarthy was sort of the face of Mr. Patriot. I'm going to make sure that we stamp out communism wherever it stands. And liberal Hollywood was considered to be very liberal and sort of a denizen for communists. A lot of members of the Communist Party were hiding out in Hollywood, and they were making these subversive films with these subliminal messages that were going to capture the hearts and minds of Americans. And Joe McCarthy made it his personal mission to root that out. And part of that was, we're going to haul these writers and directors and actors in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee, which he chaired, and we're going to make them name names and tell what was going on. We're going to get to the root of this. And that's what ruined careers, because once you were painted as a communist by the House Un-American Activities Committee, no one was going to hire you to be a dog catcher, let alone helm a major film. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we're here to talk about, which is Mr. Kirk Douglas. Thanks, Karen, for that overview and information about, what was his real name again?
Isser Danielovich Dembski.
Okay, Mr. Dembski. All right. So I think my introduction to Kirk Douglas was probably well before Spartacus actually came out. As far as how I saw movies. Although I saw Spartacus around the time later in my life than when it actually was released. But I had seen all these other movies prior to that. So I was a fan of Kirk Douglas well before I saw Spartacus. I think my first movie, if it wasn't my first movie, it was at least my second movie that I'd seen with Kirk Douglas, was a similar type genre, although this was mythology. I saw Ulysses first. And I had also seen him in a movie that I think Stephen Ivey even mentioned once before, The Gunfight at the OK Corral. My early thoughts about Kirk Douglas was like, this is a really cool actor. And I really enjoyed watching him because it seemed, for lack of a better way of saying it, seamless. He was a natural. He fit the role. So that meant to me that he was a good actor because I was convinced that he was actually Ulysses. And then when I saw him in gunfight at OK Corral, I thought this must be how Doc Holliday must have acted, because Kirk Douglas is just really suave and sophisticated, even in his grief and his torture throughout the film. So that was my introduction to Kirk Douglas. What about you, Steve? What was your introduction to Kirk Douglas?
My introduction to Kirk Douglas was actually 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I don't really remember much about the movie, to be honest, when I first saw it. It was seeing it later that really, I got the grasp of the movie and, everything that it's based on. And it was just exciting. But what really captured me the first time, and the thing that I vividly remember, was him singing and him performing A Whale of a Tale. And I can find myself literally going through the filmography when I went past 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It just popped into my head, the song. I remember it so vividly. I've hummed it at times when it made no sense for me to be thinking about anything dealing with music or anything like that. And that's just always stuck with me, the I guess the word jauntiness of the song for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It really didn't belong in the movie in the overtone of what it was doing, but it was a great moment of, they've been at sea, everything that they're doing, and he just breaks the tension with just his little song and his little tale of, girlfriend's past, I guess. And it kind of endeared him a little bit to me. And, my mom has always been a fan. And when I was little, anytime there was any kind of movie with Kirk Douglas, I would sit with her and watch many different movies. Spartacus, honestly, being one of my favorite movies he's ever done.
Mm-hmm.
I love that time period. I love the way they told the story, and I love the way he portrayed the character. And like you were saying, he's smooth. You really feel like he's trying to be the person and is emulating the person in kind of the best way that sometimes you want the character to be portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
And I really respect him for that. And, I've been a fan of his since way back when. So.
Copy that. So movies that made sense, movies that we looked at as being some of the better movies. I know we've mentioned a few of them so far. I think one of my favorite movies for Kirk Douglas, which not a lot of people are familiar with, was The Vikings. This was actually kind of a movie where Kirk Douglas wasn't just a strong character, but he showed that he could be witty, he could be charming, and he could be cutthroat, all in the same film, and yet be just as endearing throughout the whole film. This is a film that he did with Tony Curtis,
Right.
along with Spartacus. But one of his films was the first one I saw him with Tony Curtis was actually The Vikings, which came out in like 1958, and Spartacus came out in '60. Not that I would have mattered for me at the time because I saw it years later, all of these films years later, but still that prior to Spartacus, and enjoyed it just as much. And the movie where you've got Vikings who are, this northern Norse mythological ideologies with their gods and their gung-ho-ness. It is the Norse version of what we consider swashbuckling tales. And Kirk Douglas in this, he was a natural. And so I think the theme here for me is Spartacus, Ulysses, the Vikings are part of what I really like, that genre, that almost carefree Voyager kind of totalitarianism. And then on the other side for me is all the gunfight movies. So, you know, he's either got a sword or a gun. So I'm good either way with Kirk Douglas in those roles. What about you, Karen?
Well, for me, it's interesting. I mean, I remember seeing Spartacus as a child. It's never one of my favorite movies. I mean, it almost has like a cult status because, you know, I am Spartacus. I am Spartacus. I mean, it's sort of like the predecessor to, uh, oh, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where everybody, you know, says the same thing at the same time. It's like, it's kind of just what you do. But that was never one of my favorite films. And I remember seeing The Vikings as a little girl and just thinking that was like an awesome movie. But it wasn't necessarily Kirk Douglas that made me go, wow. It was more Tony Curtis than Kirk Douglas. But, you know, I was a child. Well, what the hell do I know? I was a toddler. But to me, a movie that really sort of made me sit up and take notice of Kirk Douglas. The first one was The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, because it was sort of a kind of a film noir movie before people were really talking about film noir movies that much, or before film noir really became a thing, which to me was not until like the 50s. This was the 40s movie. But it's interesting to me, the juxtaposition of the character he played in The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, which was like Walter. He played a character named Walter, I can't remember the last name, but he was the district attorney in that movie. And the whole premise of that movie is that these three friends, Barbara Stanwyck, who played Martha Ivers, Van Heflin, who played their friend, and his friend, the name I can't remember off the hand, and then Kirk Douglas played Walter, the district attorney, who's married to Martha Ivers, Barbara Stanwyck's character. They all share a secret from their teen years, and then they're thrown back together as adults. And then Heflin's character comes back to town after running away to join the circus, literally. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. But after running away to join the circus, he comes back because the circus didn't work out. And Barbara Stanwyck and Kirk Douglas think, oh my goodness, he's come back to blackmail us because now he's going to make us accountable for this secret, which involves a murder. But that's not why he's back. He's actually back just because he's kind of down on his luck, and he runs across Elizabeth Scott, who's also down on her luck, and and they kind of fall in love, but Martha doesn't know that. Martha Ivers doesn't know that, and Kirk Douglas thinks that Van Heflin is after his wife, and it's just a total mishmash of misunderstandings and fear and deception. But the reason I bring this up is because the character Kirk Douglas played in this movie debut is somebody who's kind of sniveling and but weak, but also compelling because he was so good looking. I mean, I think he was like maybe 30 when he got this role. I think he was 30. It was 1946. So he was 30 years old, as handsome as get out. He makes you want to cry. He's so damn handsome because, you can't unsee the cleft in the chin, right? But he plays this really not very admirable character at all, kind of sniveling, kind of pathetic, but then at the same time, you don't just spend all your time feeling sorry for him because he's so damn good looking and he's married the richest woman in town. So it's like, you don't feel that sorry for him. And you kind of wonder, how does he screw this up? And you can't look away. So that's really cool. So then you have that against, to me, the character he played in Detective Story in 1951, where he plays this, detective who's like very upright, forthright, you can see the American flag practically flying behind him, but he presents such a strong character that he's brittle, and he breaks as easily as the Martha Ivers character broke, as the Walter character broke in The Strange Love of Martha Ivers. They were two sides of the same coin, but entirely different approaches to get to to me, what was a very similar result. And to me, that's just fascinating, and also testament to his ability as an actor. He just has, he can play these really sort of weak characters, but really strong, kind of ruthless. But at the same time, you still kind of root for him, even if you don't like him. I mean, 7 Days in May, he was caught in between a rock and a hard place, but definitely taking second fiddle on purpose to Burt Lancaster. And he still stole pretty much every scene he was in.
I mean, and that's ironic too. Another pairing again of two really wonderful actors, Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas again in the OK Corral. So you're talking about Tony Curtis, Kirk Douglas, Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas. And even though Burt Lancaster is compelling on his own, Kirk Douglas in that movie, if he doesn't steal the show, it's right there. It's right there. And the same thing in Spartacus and the Viking with Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis is the up and comer, great lines, good throw, all that. Yet Kirk Douglas is he's got that power, that compel. He brings you into his characters every time.
Yeah, he really does. And it doesn't matter that his character isn't necessarily all that likable. You still like him, even though he's not likable, which is like Hollywood. That's gold, baby. That's what you bank on as a director, as a producer. That's who you give your star power to. The person that the audience always roots for, no matter. And you have more versatility with that kind of character than the kind of character who can't ever be the bad guy. Like Cary Grant was sort of caught in that straitjacket, where sort of the shtick was that he's our leading man, so he can't be the bad guy. And Cary Grant really wanted to play bad guy roles. I mean, they're so much fun, they're so delicious. But I think as kind of as close as he got, there was Mr. Lucky, where he was sort of dubious, and then there was Suspicion, where I just loved him in that role. But that movie was altered at the end to make him not the bad guy.
Right.
Even though he spent most of the film being a really not very good guy, he couldn't be the actual bad guy.
And the irony in that movie was he even said at the end, "I'm not the bad guy here."
Yeah, except he totally was,
That's why I don't drink milk at night.
Exactly. But Kirk Douglas didn't. But Kirk Douglas didn't have that straitjacket around him. I mean, he played Vincent Van Gogh in Lust for Life. Oh my God, what a horrid man. I mean, he painted like an angel, but who wanted to live with him? Good Christ. The man gave new meaning to the word torture.
Yeah, that was one of those sad circumstances. And if indeed Van Gogh's life was anything like what Kirk Douglas portrayed, I really felt sorry for him. He deserves your prayers.
Oh, it totally was. It was probably really worse sad. It was totally worse probably than what was portrayed in that movie. But, Kirk Douglas really threw himself into that role. I mean, he's not known as a painter, but he learned how to paint and tried to paint in the Van Gogh style in preparation for that role. So that's just one of the many things that a person can do to sort of, become that person, or to accurately portray, especially a person who is a historical figure. Right. Yeah. But he gave Van Gogh flesh and bones. He made him a flawed / human being, human character, somebody that maybe a person could relate to in a way that Vincent Van Gogh never was before that film came out. Before then, he was just some sort of lofty painter. But Lust for Life showed him as this really just, kind of a jerky, tortured, pathetic, brilliant, genius of a person who was his own worst enemy, but, compelling at the same time. That's a human being. And that's the story. Those are the stories that are the most interesting, that are worthy of being told.
Right. Yeah, good point. I mentioned the sword in one hand, the gun in the other. Van Gogh obviously was the paintbrush in one hand, and then the detective was a gun in the other. So guns are still
there you go.
Gun is still out there.
The gun is still there.
The pen or the paintbrush mightier than the sword? Not necessarily. Mightier than the gun? Not necessarily, but it's definitely out there.
The
So
man had
Steve-
weapons.
Steve, any weapons, any other Kirk Douglas-y essence that you can portray or convey to our listening audience?
I think he's muted.
Okay, I'm muted. So I was talking about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So not only is there a pen in one hand, now technically in this movie there's a harpoon in one hand,
Harpoon.
and there's a guitar in the other.
Right.
It's a man of many
Well,
talents, let me
both
tell you.
equally lethal.
But equally lethal.
Well, don't tell Slim Whitman that all the way to the bank. Just saying.
One of the things that you have to like about Kirk Douglas is he didn't have a style. He could adapt and be anyone he wanted to be. And he wasn't just relegated to very specific roles. So I feel like that definitely needing to be said of him. He was an actor of definitely many faces. So.
What you talking about many faces, Steve?
I mean, just portraying every different kind of character.
So, as far as we know, Kirk Douglas never threw a plastic bottle at a window.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah, first of all,
Really?
we have no idea if he did or did not throw a plastic bottle at a window. His
They didn't
death,
have plastic bottles then.
okay, we do not know whether he did or did not throw a glass bottle at a window. But based on his depth, he's capable for a laugh.
He did do comedy, Greg.
See? It's already there. You want to know who wasn't laughing? You.
And probably Burt Lancaster. He probably wasn't laughing either. But everybody else was.
Did he really laugh at anything?
No, he didn't.
Nothing I never noticed.
Yeah,
no.
so
It was kind of,
he
I don't
doesn't
think
even
he never had.
Yeah.
You know what? Yes, he did, and I'll tell you when. Sorry to segue from Kirk Douglas for just a moment. What was his title? It wasn't the name of the movie. Was it Edgar Gentry? What was that movie?
Oh, Elmer Gantry.
Elmer Gantry. Because his evangelical essence, he was always smiling and laughing in that whole movie. So
Yeah, but it still wasn't funny.
All the other movies know. But that movie was supposed to take up for all the movies that he didn't.
Greg's reaching.
He really is.
Oh, he does smirk and make a little grin in what's the movie? Kevin Costner.
No Way Out.
If you build it, they will come.
Field of Dreams.
He did smile and say, "Yes, young fella," in that movie.
Can we work this back to Kirk Douglas?
We are.
Yeah.
That was the
And
end of
just
my
kind of
segue.
leave your personal problems outside of our podcast?
I was
Thank you.
leaving that alone.
That's what
after
I was
that.
thinking, but Greg just got to bring himself in all of this.
In much the same way that Kirk Douglas does with his various movie roles.
See,
Take it away, Greg.
So about Kirk Douglas in his various movie roles and how he just, wins us over. Kirk Douglas was a handsome guy, but it didn't really matter. I think what was great about him being an actor, as I alluded to before, he brings you into the character. Whatever he's playing, you're going to understand and have some type of relationship with the character that he plays in every single movie that I've ever seen him in. I love that about him. I love that about his acting. And I agree with Steve in that it really didn't center him as being this thing or that thing. He was a multitude of things and therefore unleashed, uncaged, not having to worry about fitting into anything. And that was cool. And then I don't know who helped him to pick the roles that he chose, but they were good choices for the most part that I ever saw. And so I was a big fan. There are two movies, Big Sky and Big Tree, both Western style essence. He was the big star, just like Big Star, which was another one of his movies. Big was a big word, I guess, obviously, back in the 50s and the 60s. But those were good, decent movies. They weren't all great movies. I'm not going to say that. But they were palatable and better than that because he was in it. That's the thing. And that's the kind of actor that you want to star in any of the films that you ever watch and or hear about even. So I applaud Kirk Douglas for his true essence of diversity. He played all kind of roles, good, bad. There was a crooked man. I mean, you want to just hate this guy, but you can't because he's too compelling to hate. He makes the character too interesting for you to just give up on it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I loved about Detective Story, because it's just the ironies involved. You have this setup, this is a man who always does the right thing. This is a man who's straight as an arrow, who's a pillar, literally a pillar of the community. And he just literally crumbles into dust and sets himself up for complete ruination because of his myopic view of the world and his intolerance and bigotry and misanthropy towards women, ultimately. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, watch the movie Detective Story. But it's fascinating to watch, and a real sort of tour de force for him, I think.
And his characterization, as you just alluded to, that's multiple personalities. That's a schizophrenic ideology there. He goes from here to there to there to there. And the irony is, that's the same person. The irony is you're happy with him, you're unhappy with him, you're mad with him, and you're sad with him. He takes you through each emotion, and you're just glued.
Right. And like in Detective Story, he had everything that the American dream says you need to be a successful man and to, do the right thing by God and country. And he still managed to screw it all up.
Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy.
Yep.
Well, we're running out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Did want to try to talk to us a little bit about the Academy Awards. We've got a few minutes. Is there any one of the Academy Awards, which, ladies and gentlemen, is this Sunday, any movie that's kind of your front runner before we get out of here? And after we do this, after the Oscars, we're going to come back with an Oscars show, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about what happened and what we felt should have happened. Steve?
I'm going to go with Best Picture. Joker is my front runner, even though I'm fairly confident it's not going to happen. Followed by 1917 and Ford versus Ferrari. Of the movies, I've almost seen every movie on this list. The amount of praise 1917 is getting, not to mention the Academy loves those kind of movies. But I think Ford versus Ferrari for me is right there too. But I think Joker's a clear-cut winner.
Copy that. Karen?
Well, I think 1917 is the clear front runner for Best Picture because, like Steve said, the Academy loves those types of movies. I think Renee Zellweger is the front runner for Best Actress for Judy, even though Judy's not going to win Best Picture. My personal front runner for Best Actress is Cynthia Erivo. I think it's Erivo or Nevo. Erivo for Harriet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but she's not going to win. It's probably going to be Renee Zellweger. And for the other categories, to me, this is not like the best year for movies. I'm not particularly excited about the crop of period. of this year's nominees. I haven't seen Ford versus Ferrari, and I would like to see that. But overall, I didn't think the past year for movies was particularly outstanding in any way, as I've said before. So, meh on the Oscars.
Well, if it was up to me, Ford versus Ferrari would win. But I agree with the both of you. I think 1917 is the kind of movie that, as Steve says, that the Academy likes, and as Karen said, the Academy loves. Okay, so I did both of those. And then, and then there's, I think the Joker. I agree with you, Steve. I think it's a great movie. It's just the sad thing is it's just not going to win. And I think the Academy has something against Joaquin Phoenix and the Phoenix family for some strange reason. I just have that feeling. So anyway,
I'm sure it's a strange reason as to what I mean. That's going definitely right there to when Tommy Wiseau was on stage and they were like, "Yeah, he can't talk."
Right.
You get no, Franco, don't let him talk.
Right. Well, wait a minute. We can't have Franco talk either. Oh my God.
No.
Oh, now what are we gonna do?
No, during that year, Franco actually you could see that Franco was like.
No. It was his job to corral Wiseau. But at the end of the day, they didn't want him talking either.
No. You win some, you lose some.
You win some, you lose. You take your chances, and you go with the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, indeed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you hanging out with us here on A Real Point of View. We're hoping that you enjoyed the Oscars anyway. We're going to watch anyway to see what goes on. But not a really huge year for film this year. And as one of my associates once said, I think you'd be surprised that the movie that really wins won't be any of the ones we mentioned. It might even be Parasite, because Parasite's really on the rise. So you never know.
But it's also true that just because the Academy says a picture's the best picture doesn't mean it's really the best picture. The best picture may be a picture.
For a fact.
Yes, the best picture may be one that hasn't been nominated at all. Just because it's about a war and people die doesn't make it the best picture. In 1917, I'm looking at you. Not that I feel strongly about this sort of thing, mind you, but I mean, I'm sure it's a fine.
I'm not gonna lie,
film,
you called people out on that one.
I did.
Yeah, you did.
I'm this close to a rant. Don't push me because I'm this close to the edge.
We don't.
Just saying.
0 time. No time. No rants.
No rant.
You come back. You can come back and rant after the Oscars all you want. No pre-rant. No pre-Oscar rants.
Okay.
No rant.
You heard it here first, folks. I'm definitely doing an post-Oscar rant.
Cool. Right. You can have your own podcast that day.
No, it'll be this podcast.
So I'm going to go ahead.
Well, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
Ooh, I think that's a statement.
So much for professional courtesy.
Hey, Steve and I deal with culture, professional culture every day. That's who we are. Okay. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging out with us here at A Real Point of View. Check out our other things that we have listed on our YouTube channel, all the different episodes there, and also check our archives back on Blog Talk Radio. So thanks again for hanging out with us. We appreciate you and hope to have you come hang out with us again next week after we do the Oscar, post-Oscar.
Post-mortem. Post-Oscar, post-mortem. That's what I would call it.
I think she's right. All right. Take care, everybody. Peace out.